Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Cara.
Today we're going to have a hard conversation.
Yes, we are.
It's uncomfortable. It's a tough listen. It's about opiate addiction and naloxone or Narcan use and fentanyl and how all of those things intersect. It's about not just recreational drug use, but it's about buying medication. It might be pain medication online that is not through a pharmaceutical chain, but through a back channel chain that is actually then drug that is made by drug cartels. You have no idea. And boom, there's the fentanyl. And the why of all of this. Why is fentanyl in these drugs? How much? What is the risk? What is the approach? And it's a hard conversation, Vanessa, because this is one where you have to talk to the kids in your life about a consequence that is unthinkable, unspeakable. It is the consequence of death upon use of one of these drugs or substances. And it feels like an unbelievable conversation until they hear about someone in their life who has had that complication.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered this a bit with Dolly Clock in our episodes with her, and they're wonderful. Go back and listen because they're sort of wide-ranging about substances that kids are exposed to or maybe using and the party culture. Today's conversation with Marcia Lee Taylor is much more specific and more specifically about fentanyl, how it's made, where it can be found, why it's so dangerous. Marcia is a strategy advisor to Song for Charlie, an incredible education organization about fentanyl. And she's the former president and CEO of the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids. She has 3 decades of public and private sector experience in the addiction field. She's a total pro. She also has teenagers of her own. And this conversation is so full of data. It's so full of science. It's also really full of guidance for how to get into these conversations, how often to be having these conversations, hot tip, very often, and why this is a topic where we actually kind of need to scare the crap out of our kids in a way we may not in other subjects.
Right. And for those of you who are wondering, I just don't get this because it seems like if fentanyl kills, then drug dealers would never want to put it in their drugs because they're going to kill off the people who are buying from them. Marcia gives an incredible answer to that and all of the other questions that may be roiling through your minds. So I hope you stick with it and enjoy.
Hi, Marcia. It's so great to have you here.
So nice to be here. Thank you.
We were connected actually by Christopher Pepper, originally, a wonderful health and sex educator in the Bay Area who connected us to the amazing organization with whom you work, Song for Charlie, which is doing just life-saving, world-changing work around raising awareness and education about fentanyl and the dangers of fentanyl. And for folks who've listened to this podcast for a long time, you can go back and listen to our episode with Dolly Clock, which kind of talks generally about lots of different drugs and substances and trends. But today's episode with Marcia is really a deep dive on fentanyl. And we don't normally go scare the crap out of people on our episodes. We're normally like pretty optimistic. Cara's like really sunny and positive and glasses half full. I'm somewhere sort of in the middle, but we're usually not fear-mongering. In this case, you're going to notice a different tone in this conversation, even though we're going to be just as constructive and just as empowering as we have been. But this is a very, very, very serious topic. And it's very scary. So, Marcia, can we start there with what is fentanyl and why is it so scary?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for devoting an episode to this topic. It is a heavy one, but it's one that's really important that parents understand. So today's parents didn't grow up with the drug landscape that we have today. It's very different. So parents really need to get their arms around it and understand it in order to be able to talk to their kids really effectively and keep their kids safe. So fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. So that means it's man-made from chemicals, and it's in the same class of drugs as heroin and prescription pain medications. The difference is fentanyl is much, much stronger. So it's 100 times stronger than morphine and 50 times stronger than heroin. So just a little bit, 2 milligrams, can be deadly. 2 milligrams is a fatal dose. And just to put that in perspective, 2 milligrams is basically the amount you could put on a tip of a pencil. So it's a tiny, tiny amount. People get confused sometimes about fentanyl because there are 2 different kinds of fentanyl. There's illicit fentanyl, which is what we're talking about today. And then there's medical grade fentanyl. And so people may have even taken fentanyl themselves in a medical setting. So oftentimes it's used by doctors in the emergency room if a patient is in a whole lot of pain, or an anesthesiologist will use it in the operating room, or it's oftentimes used with end-stage cancer patients for cancer pain. And that is a perfectly legitimate use of medication. So I don't want to scare people away from that.
That's very helpful. That is a very helpful distinction. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, we're not talking about that here. That in the medical grade sense, it is dosed in micrograms and it is very precise. So in the illicit drug sense, it is not precise at all. It is all over the map, but it's generally in milligrams. So a milligram is 1,000 times more than a microgram. So we're just talking apples and oranges here. And in addition, we say fentanyl, but it's really this chemical soup that's happening. All sorts of different things. There's so many adulterants, different adulterants that are being discovered all the time. A lot of animal tranquilizers in there. So this is stuff you really just want no part of. And it's really important that people understand the risks associated with it.
One really common question that we get is the question about how does this make sense if it's so lethal that a drug dealer, for instance, you can sort of walk yourself through the math. If there's something that is added to a drug that makes it even more addicting, that would make good business sense for a drug dealer who's going to get more and more business. But to add a substance that is this lethal is confusing. Can you help explain that a little bit?
So it does seem on its face like drug dealers are killing their clients, right? And it's a bad business move. I don't think that's what's happening, though that is what it looks like. I think what's happening is the drug manufacturers are trying to get the recipe right. So they want to have a dose that is so strong, it really brings you like right up to the edge before it's going to kill you, because the more potent a substance is, the more addictive it is. And the New York Times had a fascinating article in December about this. And it went kind of behind the scenes with drug manufacturers in Mexico. And it turns out they're testing fentanyl batches on bunny rabbits and on chickens. And if it takes more than 90 seconds for a bunny rabbit or a chicken to die after being given a dose of fentanyl, the drug manufacturers determined that they need to make it stronger. They also are testing it on, they're paying homeless people to take doses of it to see if it kills them. They really want to bring people right up to the edge and have as many people get addicted as possible, so they have these repeat customers. And I think, the drug cartels kind of look at the deaths as, a cost of doing business along the way, which is terrible because we all know families who have been affected by that.
It is unthinkable to look at it through that lens, right? That there is essentially, in the name of science, there are people who are looking at how you push this to the limit. But that I think that is a very, very important frame. And it's really critical for all of us to start there in this conversation, because this is not the sort of accidental, willy-nilly. It may be somewhere and it may not. This is the sprinkling of fentanyl into the illicit drug supply is quite intentional.
Yeah. So Marcia, let's go there because it's because it is so potent. The way it is included in illicit drugs, counterfeit prescription pills, powders is uneven. And it's not just because it's been adulterated or it's mixed in with other things. Help us understand how it works, how it's used in the drugs that kids might be exposed to. And then I want to talk about the concept of poisoning versus overdose. But first, help us understand how a kid might encounter fentanyl.
Yeah. So what the drug traffickers have done is brilliant from a business perspective for them. They have made counterfeit pills that look identical to real pills. And, we as Americans don't really have a fear of medication. We started this opioid crisis that we're currently in with people taking prescription drugs that weren't prescribed to them or taking too many prescription pills that were prescribed to them. We like our pills. So the most common way that a teenager or a college-age kid would come in contact with fentanyl is in one of these counterfeit pills. And when I tell you they look identical to the real thing, you cannot tell them apart. Doctors can't tell them apart. Law enforcement officials can't tell them apart. The only way you can tell them apart is by testing them. They also are putting fentanyl into powders. So heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. So in today's drug landscape, I think the only message for parents to be giving their kids is no pills, no powders. They're just not safe. You don't want to take the risk. There is no margin for error with fentanyl.
And I'm sure people are listening to this saying, oh, my kid would never take a pill. My kid would never try a powder. I have a good kid. I've told my kid no drugs. Why can we not think that way, Marcia? Why do we have to shift our thinking and our communication with kids?
Well, those of us who have teenagers know that they can make bad decisions sometimes, right? And they have good intentions, but sometimes, kids mess up. And when we were all growing up, you could mess up and you could wake up the next morning and do better. Unfortunately, in the age of fentanyl, there's no margin for error. And one mistake can be a deadly mistake. And in my work, I work with a lot of families, including the parents that founded Song for Charlie and Mary Trinan, who had great kids who lost their lives to fentanyl and one foolish mistake.
Can you tell the story of the origin of Song for Charlie so those who aren't familiar understand it?
Yeah, so Song for Charlie is a national nonprofit organization that was founded by Ed and Mary Trinan after losing their son Charlie to a fake fentanyl pill when he was a senior at Santa Clara. And Charlie had had back surgery previously, had been given prescription pain medication. He was familiar with it. He ordered one online, took it, and it was a fentanyl pill, and it killed him instantly. So they have dedicated their lives to making sure that other families never have to experience that loss. Song for Charlie educates kids directly online to make sure that they understand that the drug supply is really deadly and that there is fentanyl in pills and powders. And they also educate parents so that they can really be equipped to have these conversations with their kids.
I want to circle back to a comment you made about testing and talk for a second about how one determines if a pill, let's take powders off the table for a second, we can circle back to them, but how one determines if a pill is safe. Because if I'm listening to this conversation, I'm having a series of thoughts. One of those thoughts is, how do I know that my pill from my pharmacy is safe? So I think a little reassuring language around that might be helpful. And the difference between ordering through a pharmacy and ordering online, and just understanding the supply chains for those who don't know them. And then the second being, someone has a pill and they think they can test what's in that pill before they put it into their body. And I'd love to understand what that looks like.
Yeah. So I think it's a really important distinction between what you get at the pharmacy and what you get someplace else. There is a very tight supply chain in the United States for pharmaceuticals. So a doctor has to prescribe it. It can only be, the prescription can only be filled by an authorized pharmacy. So there are two names that have to be on every prescription bottle, your doctor's name and your name. If that's the case and you're taking something under doctor's orders, then you can be confident that it is a safe product. But if you are getting it anywhere else, even if someone says that it came from a medicine bottle, there is no way of knowing that. The drug supply is unsafe. Most pills that are out there are illicit. So even if they don't contain fentanyl, they contain one of a zillion other chemicals that can harm you in some way. And kids oftentimes will have this belief that if they get a pill from a friend, that it is safe because their friend wouldn't want to hurt them. And their friend may not want to hurt them, but where did the friend get it from?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that tightly regulated supply chain. If you sort of trace it back to its origin, it's from a drug cartel that manufactured it. So that's the first thing. Second thing, in terms of testing, this is something that I want to really drive home. There is no such thing as a pill in pill form that has been tested. In order to test a pill with a fentanyl test strip, you have to crush and destroy the pill and test the entire pill. Oftentimes people will think, oh, I'll just shave a little bit off the pill and test it. And that's not effective because there's something called the chocolate chip cookie effect. So if you've ever had a chocolate chip cookie that has a whole bunch of chips on one side and not so many chips on the other side, the same is true for a pill with fentanyl. So you can have a concentration of fentanyl in one part of the pill and none on the other side. So if you shave off a little, it might test as fentanyl free, but the pill could be loaded with fentanyl every place else. And same is true for one pill in a baggie. If you test one pill and destroy one pill, that tells you nothing about what the other pills in that bag contain. So the message I think parents really need to drive home with their kids is if someone hands you a pill and tells you that it's safe, that it's been tested, they're lying to you. Nothing in pill form has been tested and is proven to not be fentanyl unless it has your name and your doctor's name on the pill bottle and you got it at a pharmacy.
So when you hear that testing strips are being handed out on college campuses or made available, what's the point of them?
So, testing strips are tricky. As the mom of two teenagers, I would not trust my kids' lives on a testing strip. They're hard to use. That said, if I had a loved one with an opioid use disorder and they were going to be using substances, no matter what I said, 100%, I would use a test strip to see if a batch of whatever they were using contained fentanyl or not. I think that is a perfectly good use and a great public health innovation. But I don't think that's part of the conversation for teenagers.
And just to sort of put a bow on this whole piece of the conversation, you made this great statement, no pills, no powders. In the powder form, it appears more testable, right? Because the substance is already powdered, but same rules apply. You have to test the entire pile, line, whatever, of powder in order to determine whether or not there's fentanyl. And testing requires dissolving in liquid and then using the test strip.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. And it's just important to remember there's inconsistency. There's no quality control. This is not a pharmaceutical product made in a lab.
Marcia, can we talk for a minute about the importance of language around fentanyl, poisoning, opioid overdoses? You mentioned earlier about Charlie, the organization Song for Charlie is named after him. We are going to talk about the statistics of how many young people die from fentanyl. Why is it important for us to make a distinction between poisoning and overdose? What's the meaning behind that? Or how can we help educate people by using really precise language in that
So
context?
I think the difference between poisoning and overdose can be helpful to a point. I think that poisoning indicates that someone was deceived. They're taking something they didn't know what it was. Though I do worry about focusing too much on the difference because as someone who's spent their life working in substance use policy and working with addiction, I don't want to have a distinction between sort of the innocent deaths and the guilty deaths. No matter what happens, if someone has had a substance use disorder or if this was the first time they ever touched a substance, it is a tragedy no matter how you slice it. But I think the difference with fentanyl is we need to make sure that parents are aware this can happen on the first time. So that if there are no warning signs, their kid's not using, you still can't breathe easy because it just takes one mistake.
That's really helpful. I want to talk about statistics because it feels hard right now to know exactly what the data is and to get reliable data about what's happening. There was information out that deaths from overdoses were declining in this country. And yet we're also talking about this uncontrolled substance that is absolutely terrifying and is deeply affecting young people. Can you talk through some of the statistics that we have, Marcia?
Yeah. So each week we lose the equivalent of a classroom full of students to fentanyl overdose in this country. So it is an unacceptably high number. If we were losing a classroom of students to anything else, there would be outrage and we would be talking about it nonstop. I think substances sometimes get swept under the rug and we don't really deal with them as head on as we should. You are right that overall overdoses are decreasing in the United States, but they're decreasing from an all-time high. So even though they're down a little bit, which is great news, they're still unacceptably high and in nowhere near sort of the level we were even, a few years ago. It's been really on a steep trajectory up. So right now, we don't know exactly why overdoses have decreased overall in the United States. From doing this a long time, I would say it's multiple reasons. It's probably a little bit on the supply side, probably a little bit because we have wider availability of naloxone. So there are more overdose reversals, probably a little bit because we're telling parents to have these conversations with their kids and that's happening. So it's probably a range of reasons. But we know that the overdose rates are still unacceptably high and they're not down universally around the country. There are pockets of the country, the Northwest, for example, where overdoses are actually increasing. And we also see with various populations, particularly minorities, that overdoses are increasing as well.
We're seeing cuts across the board at the federal level in all sorts of programming, right, around health and wellness. I'm wondering, given those reasons why overdoses may be on the decline, do you think that we are about to see a resurgence? Do you think that we will even see the data that shows whether or not there's a resurgence? How does the current landscape play into the information that you have that we can then pass along to people to help inform and educate them?
So there's a lot of reasons to be concerned. When you see progress, you keep doing all the things until you're sure exactly why. You can actually pinpoint what exactly is working. We know that there have been what are called clawbacks to certain COVID-related mental health and substance use funding. That's going to directly impact a lot of the resources that potentially have been helpful to decreasing overdoses. We've also seen there's a federal agency that's responsible for substance use and mental health policy and also funding for not only national programs but also in every state in the country. And the staff has been cut dramatically, and the federal budget has not yet been released. Now we're getting really in the weeds, but the federal budget has not been released, so we don't know what the budget numbers are going to be. I think there's a lot of fear that they may be lower. There's a lot of work to be done to make sure that we're maintaining a level of effort on the prevention front, on the treatment front, on making sure that naloxone is available widely and that people know how to use it. We need to keep up all these things. There have been some good advances on the supply side with Mexico. Unclear if those will be sustained. It's too soon to tell. But some hopeful signs there. But there needs to really be a balance between the supply side and the demand side, reducing the demand for substances at the same time.
What are your recommendations about naloxone, having it in your house, having kids carry it in their bags, having it in their dorm rooms? Like what's your guidance?
Yeah, or maybe
there?
can you just do a quick top line, what it is, how it works, and then let's get to exactly what Vanessa asked.
So naloxone is an opioid overdose reversal agent. So if someone is experiencing an opioid overdose, you can administer naloxone. It's a nasal spray. You can administer it very quickly, very easily, and it can reverse the overdose. If someone is overdosing on another substance like cocaine, methamphetamine, a stimulant, a different class of drugs, unfortunately, naloxone is not going to work on them. It only works on opioids.
But it doesn't do harm if you give it to them and it's not what they took.
Exactly. So a big takeaway here is if you see someone who is unresponsive and you think they've taken something, it doesn't matter what they've taken. It is always safe to use naloxone. You're not going to harm them. If they've used cocaine or methamphetamine, or if they're passed out from alcohol, you're not going to help the situation, but you won't hurt it. The other really important thing is if you are able to reverse an overdose using naloxone, you still have to call 911. And naloxone can wear off sooner than the opioid wears off. So when the naloxone wears off, someone can re-overdose from that opioid. And it's really critical that you call 911 so they can get appropriate medical care.
I mean, I think this is such a critical point. We have to hammer this home, not just with kids, but with adults too. Calling 911 is separate and apart from using naloxone. For both of the reasons you just described, right? First of all, naloxone doesn't work for non-opiates. And so if someone, I know of a family who just a few months ago lost a child to a cocaine overdose. And the story that unfolded was that there was someone else on the scene who gave naloxone, saw the overdose, thought it was an opiate overdose, then gave the naloxone and then fled the scene because they were afraid of being in trouble and never called 911. And this is so critical because taking one right step doesn't negate the importance of taking a second critical step of calling for help.
It's a really great point. So most states have what's called Good Samaritan laws. So if you call 911, you're not going to get in trouble. It is so important that you take that step to save someone's life. And I know I've heard stories about parents who are having parties who don't want someone to call 911 because they don't want the ambulance to come to their house. It is always the right decision to call 911.
Yeah. And for those of you who think, oh, well, my kid's never going to have that, like they're not going to carry it with them, they're going to tell me they don't want it in their dorm rooms. I am here to tell you, kids understand. If you've had these conversations with them, they understand. They let people know they have it in their dorm rooms. Groups of friends will charge someone in that group or half of that group even to carry naloxone on them at like big college festivities or concerts or festivals. Like, if you are cynical, I'm here to tell you, kids can hear this. They can understand the danger. They will take it on board, but you have to be in conversation with them about it in order for them to get why it makes sense to have that responsibility.
I mean, when I was moving my kids into college, we were doing the big bathroom run, and we were at Target going through all the shampoo aisles and the soap and all the things. And you get to the pharmacy that's located, and there was a line of parents waiting to fill naloxone prescriptions for their kids to have on hand. You're not an outlier if this is something that you give your kids.
And if you get it for your house, which I do, I have a few different boxes in different parts of my house. I've shown my kids exactly where it is. And to your point, Marcia, like it may be this, like they have people over and they're not supposed to, and they're going to be in trouble and they don't want to call anyone. And it's like the conversation over and over is, here's where it is, call 911. It's more important to save a life than it is to worry about being grounded. Like the number one priority or in trouble with the law, the most important thing is that you save someone's life.
Yeah. And it's important to have it on hand because seconds can make a difference in saving life. So you can't just wait for to call 911 to have the ambulance arrive. Those seconds matter. And just, I think sometimes people are uneasy and want sort of a how-to guide. At Song for Charlie, we have a 90-second video of how to recognize and respond to an overdose, how to use Narcan, the whole naloxone. The whole process is very easily explained, and we can link to that.
Yeah, just a couple of details around that just to help people who don't know. So Narcan is one brand name of naloxone. Naloxone is in medicine, we have two names for everything. So naloxone is the name that is generic. Narcan, I'm seeing in Los Angeles on buses all over the place, advertisements for Narcan in particular. So there's a big campaign going. So if you see that word, that's what that is. And the administration is generally nasal spray, right, Marcia? And so it's not like an EpiPen where you have to give someone a shot. This is a nasal spray, which frankly feels a lot more achievable for many people when they realize they don't have to give someone a shot.
And Marcia, how does it work? Because I've ordered it from Amazon, actually, and have it around my house. But then there are places where you can get it for free, places where you need a prescription. How does that work?
So most states have what's called a standing order, so you can get it without a prescription at a pharmacy, and that is a great way of getting it, ordering it online. If there's a harm reduction organization in your community, and you can just Google harm reduction near me and find a harm reduction organization where you can get it for free as well.
So now that we've sufficiently laid, honestly, very scary, upsetting groundwork, let's talk about how parents can be in conversation with their kids, educate themselves, educate their kids, and I want to start actually from the sort of preventative side, which is I don't want people to wait until they see a problem, right? Because every kid should be getting this information. However, there are certain kids who may be struggling. We may see signs that we're concerned about. What should we be looking for in kids? Sometimes there is no sign. So I don't want people to think, oh, well, it's only if I'm worried about my kid should I have a conversation about fentanyl. But there are things we know about why kids turn to substances. Can you talk about some of those signs?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're exactly right that every kid needs to hear about this, and it needs to be an ongoing conversation. So it's not just a one check the box, we're done.
You mean the weekly fentanyl conversation in my my house? You're actually going to laugh, Marcia, because my kid was going to a concert. One of my college kids was going to a concert. And literally, I opened my mouth to have the fentanyl conversation yet again. And he was like, I know. And he just like recited back to me everything I've ever said to him. And I was like, great. Thank you. Like, I don't need to say it. You know it. I will continue to say it. But thank you for showing me that you've actually heard what I have to say.
Yeah. And it's important to have those reminders all the time. So I think every kid needs to know about substances in general and have a really specific conversation about fentanyl. Yeah, so I think it's really important that we don't separate the mental health conversation from the substance conversation. There was a former head of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, a federal agency that deals with all of the drug research, that used to say, People use drugs for one of two reasons: to feel good or to feel better.
Mm.
And there's a lot of self-medication that goes on. We know that coming out of COVID, there are a lot of kids who are still struggling, some really struggling silently, and others struggling more visibly. I think that, we need to be checking in on kids for how they're coping, and making sure that they're not coping in unhealthy ways, including with substances. It's one of the many unhealthy ways they can cope. So just making sure they've got good, healthy coping skills. But there are certain comorbidities, to use a way too fancy term.
That's okay. Cara uses it all the time. People are used to.
I feel better now. Parents should really be on the lookout. So any sort of trauma that's happened with a child, a learning disability, ADHD, anxiety, any sort of mental health issue that they're grappling with, a divorce. There's really all sorts of reasons why you need to have a special eye on those kids to make sure that you shore them up and making sure that they're not turning to substances to cope with what they have going on.
So you've, in just 3 examples, and there are more, you've just essentially encapsulated about 80% of all kids, right? Which is just to say that every single, just Vanessa proves your point. Every single kid needs these conversations. I'm wondering if you have recommendations, Marcia, about different ways into the conversation at different ages. If you've seen any specific language or examples or strategies work better when kids are younger, sort of in grade school, middle school, versus in high school, versus beyond high school.
Yeah. So I think you do need to start young. And with my kids, I started with talking about medicine, that I was the only one who could give them medicine, or, if I told them that that a babysitter could give them medicine, then they knew that person was, an okay person to receive from, but they never could take it on their own. So you have to have those right-sized conversations for kids. I think there's also a lot to do with health, where you talk about putting healthy things in your body and we don't put unhealthy things in our body. So those really basic conversations when they're little. When they're in late elementary, early middle school, most kids are still pretty anti-drug, and it's a good time to kind of have more specific conversations about what substances they might come into contact with. If you see someone smoking or talking about drinking, you're looking for teachable moments to really work the conversation in.
My kids think seeing someone smoke a cigarette is like way worse than, we lived in New York City, than seeing someone like shooting up drugs on the street. I swear to God, I don't say that flippantly. It blows my mind how cigarettes
right,
are
how
like,
effective that
marketing has been. And yes, it is, like, cigarettes are dangerous for you. But when I was growing up, it was like cigarettes were everywhere. If you saw someone using drugs, it was like, hold the phone, I am freaking out. I mean, not that my kids regularly saw it, but the distinction. And to your point, Cara, like, branding matters, marketing matters. This stuff really over generations has a real impact if we are having these conversations.
Yeah. Public health education campaigns work, and we need to be funding more of them. We used to have a national campaign funded by the federal government that was everywhere. It was omnipresent. And that was aimed at teens, but also at parents. And we don't have that anymore. It's gone away. And we really need to bring something like that back so that we can make sure that we're driving home those messages. Because clearly, from your example, Vanessa, they work when done properly.
It's funny, the Nancy Reagan, this is your brain on drugs, sort of that constellation of campaigns. I often read, it didn't work. It was fear-based, this, that, and the other. And yet everyone still talks about it. Everyone remembers, who's old enough, remembers the ad that was on TV with the frying pan and the cracked egg, and this is your fried brain. And so I understand there are some messages that are more effective than others, but any message is better than no message, right?
I mean, people saw that ad and then went and like did drugs. So I mean, it stuck with them. There was a song, we've talked about this before. Apparently it must have only run in New York, this ad campaign, because Cara doesn't remember it. But do you remember the song? It was like Little Dancing Pills. And it was like, we're not candy just because we look so fine and dandy. No, is it not ringing a bell? I mean,
I'm wondering if Vanessa is having some sort of visual hallucination.
No, I looked it up on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube.
Right.
And it was like, and by the way, they got to bring that back, because with gummies and all of that, it's like, I mean, I wish our dogs could watch the same video and understand what was going on. But like the amount of people, not purposefully, accidentally ingesting gummies because they think it's candy. Okay, so I'm not making it up. I'm going to find it and I'm going to put it on our Instagram.
We're going to see. I mean, yes, 100%. That brings up a really quick side question that we get often, which is, what is the risk of fentanyl in the cannabis supply?
Right now, it does not appear that there is fentanyl in smoked weed. And part of that is because of the chemical constructs that the active ingredients kind of burn off. Right now, there's some questions about that. So again, this may not be true tomorrow. From a chemical perspective, there is no reason why there couldn't be fentanyl in any sort of an edible or a vape pen. So that's something that I, as a mom, am really concerned about.
Although I did read somewhere, actually, no, this is not true. My kid told me, he came home from health class and told me that fentanyl, because I was like, don't ever take, if somebody offers you a vape pen, like I was listing all the places fentanyl could come from. And he said, no, my health teacher told me that the temperature at which it burns in a vape pen makes the fentanyl like unable to be active or something.
So I think that's true for smoked marijuana, not vaped.
Okay.
So for smoked marijuana. But that said, if fentanyl is so potent, this is where I sort of have a question and don't want to say, oh, this is safe, go on and don't worry. If there's a certain quantity of fentanyl in smoked marijuana, I don't know the answer to whether or not that could be a potentially deadly issue, right? So I just don't think that there's anything you can say, oh, you're 100% safe, don't worry.
Right. And it's important to say to kids sometimes, hey, we don't know yet. It changes every day. And to be on the safe side, avoid it. So, Marcia, I interrupted you with my song and dance. We were up to middle school. Once kids get a little more cynical, their attitudes towards drugs and alcohol start to change. All of a sudden, the kid who was saying, I would never, all of a sudden goes quiet and has a different stance. How do we have those conversations?
So that's when you need to have the really specific conversations about fentanyl and just say, listen, we're not playing around here. There may be other things that you can make bad decisions about and, live to see another day. Fentanyl is not one of them. I think in prevention, we stay away from those scary statements because we, want to keep credibility. With fentanyl, you have to be scary because it is scary, right? And so I think that this is the point when the parents need to sit down and look the kid in the eye and say, this can kill you and you need to stay away from it, period, end of sentence. It's a no-go zone. And you have to carry naloxone with you in case someone is using it. And a way in with kids, especially teenagers, is talking about their friends. Because teenagers, as we know, in all things, whether it's driving fast or anything else, they think that they're invincible. They think they're immortal. But they do worry about their friends. So you can say to them, listen, I'm going to tell you this. I know you'll make good decisions, but in case some of your friends, in case their parents are talking to them, talk to your friends about these things. And they're more receptive to hearing about it if it's not about them. But really you're achieving two things at once. You're arming them with information to educate their friends, but you're also educating them.
Marcia, this is so valuable. I've learned so much in this conversation. we really appreciate the work you have done for really decades in helping to keep kids safe, the prevention work, the educational work. I hope that you will have the resources at your disposal to continue to do this work because the future of our country depends on it. And just super grateful for all your wisdom and all your knowledge. We'll link to Song for Charlie. We'll link to other resources in the show notes. Please come back and visit us because we have lots of open questions that we want to learn more about in the coming months.
I really appreciate you taking time to talk about this. And I know it's a difficult topic, and I hope parents will go to Song for Charlie's website and learn more and have these conversations with your kids. They are listening. Sometimes we just say it multiple times, but it's so important that we have the conversations.
Thanks, Marcia.
Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.